This is Proud on Apple Music. Here's your host, Hattie Collins.
You're listening to Proud. My name's Hattie Collins, and today I'm joined by two incredible musicians. Born and raised in Calgary, Canada, identical twin sisters Tegan and Sara released their first album, Under Feet Like Ours, in 1999.
There's something so divided.
And have released a whopping 9 albums and 7 EPs since. They've written songs for David Guetta and Carly Rae Jepsen, toured with Taylor Swift, and have soundtracked everything from the L Word to the Lego Movie.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of the team. Everything is awesome when we live a dream.
Tegan and Sara released a brand new album, Hey, I'm Just Like You, as well as the book High School, an immensely excellent coming of age and coming out memoir. In 2016, they set up the Tegan and Sara Foundation, which fights for economic justice, health and representation for LGBT women and girls. What absolute heroes. Before we meet the pair, here they are with I'll Be Back Someday.
Sit and watch my TV set. What is on will make it better. I'll be back someday.
Welcome Tegan and welcome Sara. You've just heard I'll Be Back Someday, a brand new old song from your new album, Hey, I'm Just Like You, which is comprised of revisited songs you wrote between the ages of 15 and 18. I chose that song because it's a bop and I like a bop. But I do want to talk about the book first because I have a lot of questions. Firstly, when is a sequel? You leave it on such a cliffhanger. I want to know what happened to Alex, Naomi, Bruce, your mom. What's going on? When are we going to find out more?
I think we'd both really like to write more, and I sort of tease people and tell them that we're going to jump ahead in the story. Like, we won't probably pick it right back up where we leave off in high school, only because most of the chapters would be watching Jerry Springer and eating a lot of pasta and then taking the bus to my crappy post-high school job. I mean, things didn't really get going in our music career probably for another year or two after high school. So I'm so glad that you enjoy the story and that the characters resonate with you, because after spending a year and a half writing it, I feel like we're still friends with all those people. Obviously, our parents are still our parents, and we're still close with a lot of the people we write about in the book, but I feel like very immersed in their lives again. Like, we are really like I've only just in the last couple of months stopped dreaming about high school. Like, I had really gone back into this almost like deeply subconscious place about school.
Was it traumatic or interesting?
Yeah, it was so traumatic. Yeah.
Fair.
But like in a good way.
Yeah.
You know, like in the way that like it's traumatizing, but also like I sort of felt a bit of grief, like leaving it behind, you know, like it was almost like I went through like a total second leaving the nest kind of thing.
I wish so much that I'd had this book when I was growing up. Was there anything like this for you when you guys were coming? I mean, we're roughly the same age.
I think that's partly why Sara and I wanted to write the book, is because no, there really wasn't. I mean, we grew up in the 90s and, amidst the grunge movement. And, there was amazing, we had the Riot Girls from the Pacific Northwest. We had a lot of really cool, strong female representation, but not a ton of LGBTQ representation. And what representation we had, they were decades older than us, So there were well-established, amazing, superstars like Katie Lang and Melissa Etheridge. So we knew of gay people and knew they existed. But, besides Ricky from My So-Called Life and Leisha Haley from the Murmurs, those would be like probably the two closest, people we had represented to us. So I think this book, in part, we wanted to stay in this time frame because we weren't necessarily interested in writing a music memoir so much as we were interested in writing a memoir about being young women, but also being different and alternative and weird. I think there's a lot of touchstones to our life that's relatable for people outside of the queer world. I think we've been joking that we keep getting these long letters from men, like straight men after the shows, or people who read the book, and they're like, literally that was my experience in high school. And of course it was. We were pining for girls, like we were obsessed with Nirvana. We were taking drugs and we were total dirtbags. And I think there's a lot of relatable...
slightly dirtbags.
Yeah, there's lots of relatable things in our story that we wanted to share.
Well, that's perfect timing for the first track that you've chosen, Tegan, which is Nirvana, Come As You Are. That was Come As You Are by the almighty Nirvana. It's a great place to talk about the book because that song reminds me of a moment that really resonated with me in the book. There are many, but one in particular, Tegan, that you recount when Bruce is talking about Kurt Cobain and he calls him a fag. There's other moments in the book, but for me, when I was growing up and like people were being homophobic around me, or like when you watch TV and you saw two women kissing and you're with your family, or like people holding hands in the street, and you'd have this, well, for me, I would have this like horrendous feeling of like embarrassment, anger, shame, like feeling very exposed. How did you feel at those points?
Well, it's really interesting. I really wanted to include the story about my stepdad using the word fag because he's an incredible man. He's been a wonderful parent to us, really. He stepped into our life when we were 7 years old. And this was this like 6'4", total babe, leather jacket, slicked back hair, hooks up with my mom who has these 2 kids and takes on this whole life, like instant family. And he worked at a steel mill and played hockey. He was a construction worker. And my mom went back to school. And so we were alone with him a lot. And he really had to step into it's basically a Hollywood movie waiting to be written,
I was going to say, this has to be a film.
Right?
Seriously.
Like machismo, iron worker stepdad type that comes in and has these 2 obnoxious alternative, teenage daughters all of a sudden. But
Who he was totally obsessed with. Like, he loved us.
Yeah, he adored
He thought
us.
we were the coolest.
And that's why I wanted to include the story in the book where he uses the word fag, because we have this huge blowout. We have this massive fight. And at the end, he's extremely apologetic. And he's also extremely articulate about the fact that he grew up so differently than we did, and that I spoke to him at length before we put the book out, and he gave me his permission to tell that story. And for him, he's, 62-year-old man who can articulate this very well now. He didn't say it like this then, but he said that it was an important moment because he knew something was different about us. We were very alternative on the outside, but he knew it was deeper than that. And he understood the reaction to his using this word and calling out Kurt Cobain for being different. He recognized in that moment that we were different. And so it was important to share that story. But I think for me, I experienced maybe less shame and homophobia than Sara did. And I think she reflects on that in the book really well. I think for me, how I was different, and I use different meaning like I was queer. I didn't know that I was gay, but I knew that I liked girls a lot, and we didn't have any of the language then that young people have now, or that we all have now. But music was my solace, and I think Kurt Cobain and Nirvana specifically, it wasn't just that I loved their music, it was that he was weird. Like, he was different. He was anti-establishment. He wore eyeliner. He pushed the boundaries. For me, I loved Kurt Cobain, and he was my gay icon in a weird way, even though I knew he was with Courtney Love.
Same with Prince for me. Like, Prince was, because he was so like just a freaky androgynous, and,
Sure.
and I guess, he was straight, in reality, but someone that I could gravitate towards, and he was like the guy I put on my wall until I realised that perhaps I didn't like Prince in that way. For you, Sara, when did you like figure out, when did you feel that something was perhaps different, if you like, about you?
I think I always had a sense, even as probably far back as, elementary school. I knew almost as far back as I have memory that that girls interested me. I wanted girlfriends. I wanted my mom's friends' attention. Like, I can remember, like, when I was with my dad or my stepdad, I was like, yeah, I want to be like my dad. Like, I wanted one earring because my dad had one earring. And like, I wanted a mullet because my dad had a mullet. Like, I wanted to be like guys. I wanted to perform a sort of kind of boyness, and it was sort of all with the intention of getting girls' attention. And they gave it to us. Girls always gave us attention. We were really cute and unusual as little kids. And I recognized right away there was like a real power, and girls would like follow us home from school. We were like these like chubby, identical, like twins. We were like barely 2 feet tall with like this long hair, and we would walk through the mall as little kids, and people would come up and
She
try
just
to touch
described
us.
Cabbage Patch Dolls.
That was the vision I was getting. Yeah,
We basically were. So like there was like a lot of what was happening for me. I had mixed up in this idea of like, is it because I'm a twin? Is it because I'm a girl, but I often look like a boy? I couldn't really figure it out. And then puberty hit me like a sledgehammer.
Yeah.
Like I turned 11 and I was like, oh my God, girls. Like we were on a family vacation, and I remember it really clearly that like I started feeling almost just like paralyzed by girls in bathing suits. But like girls at 11 years old, I remember being on this trip and feeling like everyone could tell that I was looking at girls' bodies.
Before we play the next song, I just wanted to talk about the actual coming out experience, because Sara, yours is a little bit similar to mine, in that my mom was like, oh no, you're not gay, it's just the people you're hanging around with. They infected me with their gayness. I know things turned around, but it quite quickly with you. Took a little bit longer with my mum. But how do you think that her reaction, or other people's reactions to your announcement of your sexuality impacted you and impacts you today? Does it still impact you today?
Yeah, it's tough. Like I think because I became sexually active a lot earlier than Tegan. I had my first girlfriend at 14, and I was dealing with a lot of things that were like quite adult, and I didn't have adults to process it with, and I was very homophobic. I was really afraid that if people found out I was sleeping with girls, that they would think I was disgusting, or that they might hate me, or that they might hurt me. When my mom finally confronted me for the millionth time and I admitted I was gay, her reaction, I think, was less about, I think there was a piece about homophobia in there, but I think there was also just this like tremendous fear. And I think my mom was so worried that I wasn't going to have a good life, or that people weren't going to like me, or that I was going to be in danger. My mom worked in sexual assault. She was a social worker. She was not clueless. She knew that there was space to be queer in the world, but it is one thing to sort of be educated and understanding about queer people and what's going on, and then seeing your child like worrying that, my mom was so worried that I was going to be like gay bashed, or like, those were things that people really thought about. But, those things culminated in, I think, me having a sense of internalized homophobia that's been really difficult for me to shake as an adult. I still feel like I struggle with my sexuality externally. Like I really do.
Proud with Hattie Collins on Apple Music.
That was Today by the Smashing Pumpkins. And Sarah, that was your choice. Tell us about that track.
Similar to Tegan when she was talking about Nirvana, I think that while we didn't have a lot of queer representation as teenagers, we were really caught up in the alternative music scene and also rave music, electronic music. And there was something very queer and gender bending at that time. I remember it was really common for Billy Corgan and James Iha in press photos. They would wear mascara. They would, they were really slim, and they would wear clothing that was more feminine. And I remember, similar to Kurt Cobain, I remember boys and adults in my life referring to some of these male musicians as being gay or being fags or whatever. And I remember feeling a sort of sense of like, curiosity and admiration for how they were pushing back on what it was to be masculine. And I think also, even just listening to the song now, it really triggers me. I was in grade 7 when I heard that song, and it changed my life. I remember not knowing if Billy Corgan was a girl or a boy when I heard his voice. I remember I had never heard guitars like that. I had never heard that sort of like drop of like guitars and this like sudden like intimacy of a vocal, and the melody, everything about it just completely changed my life in that moment. But I think a significant part of what I loved about alternative music in the 90s was that specifically with men, they were pushing back on these ideas of like masculinity. But I remember like alternative guys wearing mascara and feminine clothes, and then going to raves and seeing men holding each other's hands and thinking like, what the hell is happening? Like there was something very queer without being overtly queer.
Going back to the early years, which talking about the homophobia, and sort of popping up to now, I have lots of very well-meaning straight friends who are, would think of themselves as being very open-minded and very liberal, but they say some crazy shit sometimes. For example, oh, my friend, she's a lesbian. Or, I really like your shoes. Could I wear them? Or would they make me look like a lesbian?
Oh my God.
So I wonder like how you navigate confronting things that can make a social situation awkward. How do we, in these situations where people aren't being kind of homophobic, they're just being pretty dumb. What's your approach?
For me personally, Sarah and I differ like a little bit about this, but even I start with our live show, when people say or do something, and we hear it from stage, we have different techniques in how we police our audience. And for me, I don't think shame is a very good tool, because I think it often just makes people uncomfortable and makes them more angry. So, we try to use humor a lot to help, sway people and move people into the right lane. And I think certainly looking back at the last 20 years of our career, I think we've used humor and charm to get in the room with people who wouldn't typically think that they would understand us or get us. And I think that we have, transcended a lot of the ignorance that we faced by using humor and charm. In my personal life, I definitely have had a lot of those daft straight people questions, but I think I now maybe channel, like I bring in a different kind of person into my life, so I run into that a lot less than I used to. That being said, the other thing that when you said what you did that made me laugh is because my girlfriend does that to me all the time, where she'll put on like a jean jacket and she'll be like, do I look super gay right now?
Yeah.
And I think it's...
We do. I think I do myself.
We do it, yeah. Like, and I don't know that we're worried about looking gay, but we definitely ask ourselves, is this gay? And I'm like, do straight people... So I actually am really delighted by your story, because I'm like, oh good, so gay people or straight people do that too, where they put like a jean jacket on and a pair of Doc Martens, and then they worry, do they look gay?
Well, maybe we should worry more if we look straight. That should be my question. Oh God, do I look too straight in this?
Yeah.
You know, a gay person recently, a prominent gay person who has a show, actually brought up to Sarah and I, was like, you guys are looking quite straight lately.
I believe I heard that
Yeah.
podcast. She didn't quite say it as explicitly as that,
but she was like, you're very working with this feminine thing, and you've grown your hair out, and I didn't feel like it was accusatory in any way, but I thought that was really interesting that she brought that up, because I don't think we've talked about that very much in the culture of our band. I think maybe when we started wearing more makeup, people drew attention to it, but I think the more makeup thing was just like easy to understand. It's like everyone's got a cell phone and everyone wants a photo, so like, you know, you just want to look your best.
We're going to play Annie DeFranco next. This is Untouchable Face.
I think I'm going for a walk now.
Annie DeFranco. Didn't know much about her, Sarah, to be honest.
You know, like I took this opportunity to like focus on music. I mean, because we are touring our memoir about high school in the 1990s. So like, I'm not constantly listening to Ani DeFranco and Smashing Pumpkins, just in case anyone thinks that I'm like that guy who still listens to Pink Floyd and like has a Camaro. Like I totally listen to current music. I actually almost exclusively only listen to electronic music at this point, but it was so fun to go back and listen to Ani DeFranco, like in particular this album Dilate, which came out when we were in high school. I didn't know anything about Ani DeFranco except that I had never heard a woman, like, I mean, we grew up with like Madonna and Cyndi Lauper and Kate Bush and like so many badass, like Annie Lennox, incredible women, but like there was something so raw about Ani DeFranco. I remember it sort of feeling like revolutionary to me. Like, I mean, here she was just like with a guitar, and she was singing in a way that felt gay to me. I mean, it felt queer to me. Sometimes she was singing about women, and sometimes she wasn't. They're just like, I don't know. It was like I could just like feel gayness from her. And I remember getting her live album when I was in high school, and we had grown up listening to Bruce Springsteen's live album from the 1980s. His Bruce Springsteen live with the E Street Band. The roar of the crowd in a Bruce Springsteen live, recording sounds masculine. It sounds like a sports audience. Like they're like, it's like this like really guttural thing. And when I listened to Ani DeFranco's live record, it was women's voice. I had never heard a female audience before, which isn't to say that there weren't men there, but like it sounded like something different. And even that I don't know if I'm properly articulating how much it expanded my mind to imagine that there was a world in which a woman can stand on stage with a guitar, tell a story with very simple instrumentation, and that women would come and see her perform. I mean, this like felt revolutionary to me, and I think it was because Tegan and I were trying to imagine ourselves in a career, and that seemed like a fit in my mind.
Wanna be loved every night.
This is Proud on Apple Music.
That was Hayley Kiyoko and Wanna Be Missed, which was produced by the Futuristics, came out in 2018. The Lesbian Jesus.
Lesbian Jesus.
I love that she either calls herself that or has allowed herself to be called that by the fans.
She's consenting to it. Yeah,
She's
the
very
fans
great.
definitely came up with it, but
What words do you use to describe yourself? She calls herself the Lesbian Jesus. Where are you at with queer, lesbian, gay?
We identify as queer.
All right.
Which we started to adopt maybe 6 or 7 years ago.
Oh, longer.
Was it longer than that?
Yeah, it was
Way
for me.
ahead
It
of your
was
time.
I guess it was, well, for me. Yeah, I was just going to say, I
So
guess
2008.
2010.
Okay.
Well, we have different.
Well, when we were writing, I remember when we were writing Sainthood, I went to New York and I was hanging around with like some academics and writers, and I remember saying
I'd say
queer
like,
a lot around
we
that
started to
time.
see an influx of press and a lot of coverage of us. That was sort of from 2004 to 2008, 2009 was when we really started to kind of hit, and I think we both became very uncomfortable with being called lesbian because it felt very gendered.
Right.
And especially at that point, we
Also,
were...
no one likes that word when they use it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone likes
What
the
is it
word.
about
And
the
people
word?
cringe when they say it. It
Yeah.
sounds like you're saying labia.
Yeah.
It sounds like
vagina.
it sounds clinical. It
Straight
sounds
people,
clinical.
especially like journalists or like on TV, if they said it, like I would always see like they're like lesbian. Like, it just
You have
like
to whisper it.
They're like lesbian.
It does sound clinical, and also it sounds like genitalia in a weird way. And so I think I just found myself kind of cringing when the word was used. But I again, it was just very gendered, and it felt very feminine. And for me, as someone who has never felt that feminine, it felt like it felt like the wrong word for me. And I also think there was a part of me, in terms of my like the feminist part of me, I was like, why do men get gay? Like, gay is such a fun word. It's literally a great, positive, fun word. And why do they get it? I want it. So then for a long time, I called myself gay, which felt aggressive or something. I don't know. That had a weirder response. But yeah, we adopted queer. And for me, it encompassed my gender and my community. So it wasn't just about sexuality. It's that I'm queer. I'm different. I'm alternative. I'm on the outside. I think I'm a progressive, and I'm fringe, and I'm alternative. And I felt queer really needed to be taken back and adopted by our community. And we took a lot of slack for it, to be honest. I think a lot of women, especially, we felt like it was a rejection of lesbian to not. I understand, because we do so much work within the LGBTQ community to raise funds for women and girls, and we do make half of what male organizations make. And in terms of funding and research, we get half the interest and half the coverage. And I understand why women in our community felt like it was sort of us just assimilating in a weird way again,
Right.
like, oh, we're just becoming the same as men. And I understood that queer didn't feel feminine at first, but I think we've come a long way in the last decade, and the reality is that Sara and I have we have picked it up.
I like it because it's a disruptive word, and when I use it, I like that it makes people uncomfortable, especially straight people, and I like saying it when I'm with my in-laws who love me and adore me, but I like being like. I like meeting their friends and saying I'm queer. Or the thing is, when you're a queer woman, and you can just see that it puts people at attention.
There's still not a huge amount, though, of queer women, gay women, lesbian representation. Do you feel like things are better than when you started out? Do you feel like we still have a way to go?
There's not. I think that one of the important things is that when we're talking about scarcity and we're talking about people who have very rarely historically been represented, I don't think there can ever be enough. Like recently somebody was like, do we need another show about queer people in high school? And I was like, what? We have like 3. Okay, like straight people have made all of the shows about high school.
Literally,
there's
400 million.
thousands and thousands of shows about straight people going to high school. Do we only get 3 and then we've hit our quota?
That's it. You're done.
Why? So I really think it's always important to me to just say do I think that have we reached some kind of threshold or parity? Absolutely not. You have a gay story to tell it. You think your story's already been told? It has not been told. Go ahead and tell it. So for me, I want to see more queer stories in general. I want to see a million new stories about.
We were just joking the other night that it's been an amazing couple years for music. You've got Soak and Muna and King Princess and Hayley Kiyoko, and those are just like the smaller, not the big, like obviously Halsey, all these huge artists identifying as LGBTQ, and Sara and I were like, this is thrilling. Like, someone said, do you feel threatened? And I said, no, I feel calm because I can not work as hard anymore because someone else
can take
is beating down the weeds for us to make a path. Like, I feel like for such a long time we took up that and I feel thrilled.
Stay, you'll leave me in the morning anyway. Go if you want, I can't stop if you want to.
That was All Messed Up by Tegan and Sara, produced by Greg Kirsten, a very famous producer. He's made songs with, including like Sears Chandelier and Hello by Adele, Kendrick Lamar, lots of stuff. This is a great song. I absolutely love this song. Sara, tell me why you picked this track, please.
This was kind of thinking about when we just sort of put out a record that's kind of the opposite of this era of music. When we started working with Greg Kirsten, we really wanted to make a proper pop record and do something that would challenge sort of the pop stars of the time. I knew we weren't going to be like Taylor Swift or Katy Perry, but in some ways I knew that we would have the ear of those people if we sort of entered their lane. And it was just really fun to sort of be kind of getting out of that indie rock where everything is about authenticity and organic instruments and don't tune anything, sound perfect. It was so fun to kind of make this hyperbolic pop song and really sort of turn up the drama. Anyways, I still love the track. I think it's great.
Sick and tired of things getting tough, never gonna be enough. So recognize me, when did I become that girl?
Craig also produced That Girl, Tegan, which you chose to play from 2016.
Interesting fun fact about that is that record, that song, That Girl, is on a record called Love You to Death. In the middle of that, we had to take a 5-day break because he was flying to work with Adele, and we were like, oh, sure, whatever.
Just do your
And then
thing.
he came back and he's like, yeah, we wrote this great song. It's called Hello.
Oh my God.
Can you
Did
believe
he play it for you?
that? No.
Oh, the lyric that I liked from that song that you guys wrote with Greg Custom, Nobody Hurts You Like Me.
Yeah.
Bang. It's a wicked lyric. Love it.
Thank you. Yeah, I wrote that song. Actually, I was out in the desert. I decided to do 2 months out in Palm Springs. We'd put out this record called Heartthrob. It was a very big pop record. Had this big song Closer. We toured all over the world for 2 years straight. And I was pretty depleted. And so I was like, I'm going to go to the desert for 2 months. And the first song I wrote was That Girl. I was in a very weird relationship. I'm still friends with the girl, but it was, when you're in an argument for a year and a half with somebody, that was our relationship. It was just this constant circular fighting and making up and fighting and making up, which is very out of my personality, but I got a lot of good music out of it.
I asked the guys to choose a couple of tracks by new LGBT plus artists. First up, we have Paris and Death of Me.
Proud.
Apple Music.
This love looks like a loaded gun. Baby, you could be the death of me.
That was Paris and Death of Me, chosen by Tegan. Paris are a trio from Massachusetts, fronted by Lynn Gunn. It's quite a scary song, that, isn't it? It's like occults, snakes.
Yeah.
The video's kind of freaky wild.
Yeah, there's definitely some darkness in the music, but Lynn's, she is a badass. I saw her live for the first time this summer and I was incredibly intimidated, and she's amazing.
Coming up next is Sarah's choice. This is Black Belt Eagle Scout and Run It To Ya.
You like flowers. Run into
That was Black Belt Eagle Scout and Run It To Ya. She's a singer from the Swinomish Indian Reservation in Washington State. She also goes by the name of Catherine Paul. And she's self-described as a radical indigenous queer feminist.
Yeah.
I'm
she's
interested.
amazing. Yeah.
And the record is really solid, start to finish. I mean, I know I was saying earlier I mostly listen to electronic music, but I've also sort of had like a real a sort of re-education back into indie rock, thankfully, through more of a female, queer, just a totally different lens. Like when I was listening to indie rock, it was almost exclusively made by like straight white boys, and all of a sudden there's just this like surge of incredible artists like, Black Belt Eagle Scout, Snail Mail, J-Som. Like there's like just an incredible Japanese Breakfast, Mitski, like so many cool women of color, queer women making music that is traditionally not made by women like them. And it's just like deeply inspiring to me. And I think in a way I sort of like dislocated myself from that scene because it did feel too like boys club, and all of a sudden it's just kind of like just flourished with other types of voices. And there's just like some very, very strong, sick records out there right now made by those women.
Well, thanks very much for bringing those tunes in. Love them both. We often discuss what's up with straight people and their crazy ways. We have obviously on this show already, but within our own kind of community, there's fractures and there's issues. And something that I'm thinking a little bit about at the moment, especially with things like Pose and the way that sort of people of colour have been erased from queer culture, the biphobia that kind of happens towards bisexual people, transphobia from TERF women, all these different things. What's up with that? I mean, how do you feel that I kind of hesitate to use the word community as well because it feels like a kind of a convenient word and it doesn't always feel to me that existent. How do as a community we kind of work through these things? Because it seems like, we should be banding together and not splitting apart. But I don't know if this is just indicative of human nature or like if we're just in a bad place in the world in general. Like, what do you guys want to do about this?
I mean, I think we are in a bad place in the world in general. I also think like obviously it's a huge conversation. I think the LGBTQ plus community, we've been thrust together in a way because we need each other. There's power in numbers, and I think it is complicated. I mean, we start to break up sexual identity and gender identity, then talking about being feminists and like gender parity, and like we're having all these huge conversations and we're attacking within our community. We're very fragmented and attacking each other. And there's a whole new language that's come up in the last, 10, 15 years within our community. And I think for me, all of those issues are valid. All of those conversations need to happen. But I'm sad sometimes because I think we end up infighting a lot and we end up really focused in on our own community and pushing each other's buttons and calling each other out. And I do often think to myself, remember that there's a whole world out there that can often be against us. And we do need to work together to legislate change, to protect each other, and to see our community move forward and, achieve equality. It's why Sarah and I started the Tegan and Sara Foundation, is partly because we wanted to put our money where our mouth was. And we felt like we can just keep tweeting out articles and being angry and asking for change, or we can actually raise money and fund programs and research and change, with our power and privilege. I think as white people, and as cisgendered people, we recognize how much power we have.
Before we finish, I've got one last thought. It's great that we're seeing more visibility for LGBT plus people across culture. But do you worry that when it comes to women or people of colour and the LGBT community, that we can go too far one way and end up separating ourselves from mainstream culture when we try and create places that are safe spaces and platforms that are dedicated to our experience? How do you feel about that?
I think we're very appreciative of how much has changed over the last 2 decades since we started in music. And I think that there's an enormous, very well-meaning push towards creating LGBTQ spaces to give voice to our voices and to give space to our thoughts and ideas and what we're creating. My fear is that we're going to be preaching only to the converted. And I definitely think
You want to be able to exist in both of the spaces.
Well, and again, like I said this earlier on in this interview, I think that Sarah and I have used our charm, and I think our talent and our abilities and our hard work and our ethos and our humor to dismantle homophobia and to transcend ignorance and to thrive in the mainstream. And my fear lately is that we're going to be removed from the mainstream to move into our new palatial palace out in the suburbs in Gaytown. And I'm like, you guys, it's the same thing again. So I think I think we do need to have these spaces, but I think we, as people with privilege and power, and as people who program and dictate how our industry works and what the mainstream hears, I am a warning bell is going off in my head where I'm like, just be careful. We're not just creating spaces for all our sub communities, because I think most important is that music is a language. It's a universal language, and it can transcend all of our differences. And I don't want to miss out on that.
And I want to say, while I totally agree with that, I also find it really convenient when there are gay shows, gay programs, gay channels, gay lists, gay magazines.
Sure.
I don't mind.
Both can exist.
I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
They both can exist, and we should feel proud. We should feel proud of ourselves. We are a wonderful, vibrant, diverse community. Let us be lumped together to show how diverse and different we are. I go look at some of these gay playlists. It's like, you've got hip hop, you've got rock, you've got R&B, you've got pop, you've got bedroom pop. These lists are so diverse, and there's such a wonderful opportunity to show how eclectic and different and inspiring and
Okay, so we want
innovative.
both. So
yeah.
We're going to close out on California queer girl band Muna and their amazing new single, Stay Away. Tegan and Sara, Sara and Tegan, you have been amazing. Thank you so much for talking to me today. I thank you very much for all the work you've done as a gay woman. Maybe I'm going to start saying as a queer woman. Maybe I'm going to copy you guys.
Try it.
Do you?
Thank you. I will. It's been really great to talk to you, and I urge everybody to read that book, High School, because honestly, it was a phenomenal read. I loved it.
thank you so much for having us.
We're going to close out on Tegan, your choice. This is California girl band Muna and Stay Away.
If I see my opens, we go out dancing. If we go out